Welcome to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. It's Friday, February 21st. This is our 15th review of the year. We're talking about CW's crime procedural Good Cop, Bad Cop, starring Leighton Meester, Clancy Brown, and Luke Cook as a daughter, father, son, Hickman family trio in the family business of being policemen in somewhere in Washington, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who is Luke Cook? Because I know who Leighton Meester is and Clancy Brown.
He's a TikTok star.
Okay.
You would maybe know him. He played Sabrina's dad in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, the Netflix reboot.
Oh, he was Red there.
Yeah.
He was big and he was the devil. Right?
And then that got canceled during lockdown. So then he started TikTok, became huge, then got some roles on like Dynasty, Dollface, and Hacks. And then the writer's strike hit. He said he was done with acting. He rejected even an audition for this show. And then after
this specific show. He
yes.
said, I don't want to be in a show called Good Cop, Bad Cop.
And then producers were like, at least audition for it. He auditioned for it. He got the role and he decided to agree to do it.
Interesting. Okay. It's a small cast. There's not a lot of people, but it's a curious pairing because we've seen Clancy Brown a lot in the last few years. He's a busy guy. Leighton Meester, best known from Gossip Girl, but also I knew her career before that. She was in like an episode of House, and then she also did a movie with Hugh Laurie later on, and I think she has a connection to the Orville, right?
Yeah, I think that she was on it. But also, ever since Gossip Girl ended in 2012, she made her Broadway debut in Of Mice and Men, which I saw on opening night. And then that same year, she married Adam Brody. And then 13 years later, she's returned to the CW.
Okay, well, she plays a completely different character. She's a small-town country detective who likes shooting, trucks, diners, beer, and her greatest flaw is that this is according to her, too nice. Basically the polar opposite of what everybody who is tuning in is probably expecting to see when they hear Leighton Meester or Blair.
They're expecting to hear Blair, yeah.
Yeah, and is it really a surprise, though? Because if you look at the CW, since the late aughts, back then it was like all teen shows, specifically Gossip Girl, Vampire Diaries, One Tree Hill, Supernatural. And then there was a superhero wave with the Arrowverse. But like aging millennials, the network is now choosing to take those Choice Award actors and actresses from yesteryear and throw them into these wholesome, small-town, rural dramas.
Well, this show is part of the revamped CW's focus mostly on international productions because this was shot in Australia.
It was shot in Australia, but takes place in America, but looks like they're in Canada.
The only two Americans are Leighton Meester and Clancy Brown on the show. Mm-hmm. But because of the Next Star deal, that was when they acquired 75% of the network back in late 2022. And then they ended up getting a ton of shows canceled, such as like Walker Legacy.
Sarah or something like
that.
The
Winchesters, Gotham Knights, Walker Independence, because they wanted to focus more on reality TV.
I thought Walker and Walker Independence were still around, but I do know that just in the last 5 years, you look at the shows. Actually, if you go back even further, they're like Heart of Dixie. They would take these like really like up-and-coming stars from the 2000s, and then they would earn their own show, and then they would kind of just be laid back in that character. Because you had Walker with, what's his face from Supernatural?
Yeah, Jared Padalecki, I think.
Sullivan's Crossing was also some sort of Western. Even Superman and Lois, by the end of the Arrowverse, it was all middle America. It was just some like laid back country thing. And yes, he was still fighting Lex Luthor, but this wasn't like the New York, Gotham, Daily Planet, like all the thing you would expect from like a West Coast, East Coast, the Gossip Girls, where that was all New York, Upper East Side.
I wanted to mention
it's all moved inside, is what I'm saying.
With that Superman Lois thing, that also ended, right? But WB apparently ended it because they didn't want the show to compete with James Gunn's Superman Legacy, which was going to be released later that year. So if it wasn't for the James Gunn Superman, that show might still be around. But you're right, they all take place in these.
I'm just saying the CW has advanced in its age, and now it's kind of like with Leighton Meester, where she's no longer playing a young kid. She's playing like not a middle-aged adult, but like, you know, like growing in. She's 7 years out of the academy in this show, and so is her brother, because they had gone up the ranks together. They were going to get hired by Clancy Brown's character, Fat Hank or whatever his name is. No, I actually have the description right in front of me. It says, an odd couple, sister and brother detective team in a small Pacific Northwest. The name of the town was Edenville. Police force must contend with colorful residents, serious lack of resources, and a complicated dynamic with each other and with their police force chief, Dad, Big Hank. And so the story goes that the brother had at one point written a really negative article about the dad, saying he's just fudging the numbers and trying to make Edenvale look better, which was true. But the dad And also, you should know the brother Henry is sort of like a Sheldon-ish character. He doesn't give a crap what anybody thinks about him.
Yeah.
And he's very straight to the point and very facts-oriented. And so he gets kind of not accepted from the academy into the force. And so he goes off on his own, sort of is estranged from the family, while Lou is brought in to be like the second in command. At this point, she's like a first-rate detective. And even though it's a lack of resources and there's not a lot of crime in the show, she feels like she's under-resourced because she only has these like few other cops that she can deal with. She asks her dad to bring someone in 7 years later, and he brings the brother back. And so now it's just a huge family dynamic, and they're all tackling this case that we see in the first few minutes of this episode. The name of the episode is Peace in the Valley, where there is a botched robbery at a pharmacy.
Right. So you have Supernatural, Prodigal Son, Lock and Key, Hardy Boys. What do all these have in common?
They're not all CW.
They're not, but they all deal with siblings, and they're trying to like figure out kind of mysteries, murders.
Sure, I'll give you that.
Is.
Yeah.
So I mean, in the end, how did their chemistry? Because that's really what it depends on between Henry and
What,
Lou.
you're telling me a show called Good Cop, Bad Cop depends on chemistry? I mean, it is what it is. It's what you'd expect. They don't get along in certain respects. They get on each other's nerves. I think the expression they use is they ruffle each other's feathers. But by the end of the episode, they catch the bad guy. And so that's where it's going to go from there. He has his own love interest, which we get a quick flash to a text message he receives. She has a more on-screen love interest with this dude who is in another precinct who has better resources. And so she's probably going to develop that. Their relationship with their father, right now, it's kind of like each and everybody is on their own, but also their stepmom. It's kind of like complicated with that. But overall, it kind of feels like a Blue Bloods thing where the family is destined to be friends. So yeah.
And with Big Hank, he signed on right after he completed shooting the penguin, and he wanted to do a complete 180 turnaround.
It is because he was the family. He was still in a crime drama, but he was still in the family-oriented element. He was just on the other side of it, because he was the bad guy, and it was a crime family versus being the good guy police force family.
Clancy Brown, I feel like, has reached J.K. Simmons status where it's like he's just going to be in everything from now on. And we shouldn't even be surprised if he shows up in whatever it is.
I do like the days when I would think back and I wouldn't know him by name, but like he would show up in Lost and I'd be like, is that Mr. Krabs? Like that type of thing. It is, right?
Yeah.
That's who he voices?
Yeah, I think he's voiced it for like 25 years.
And so like with J.K. Simmons, who's voiced the yellow M&M, I guess, yeah, that makes sense. It's a good comparison.
So Adam Brody started Nobody Wants This, also a comedy. That was on my best of shows back in December. So really, I'm asking, is Good Cop, Bad Cop, does that have a chance on being of your best of list?
This is a cast of like 3 people, like I said, and it's very low budget. It was produced by Roku and Stan. They are not known for being like, I would be surprised. There's another show called Good Cop, Bad Cop that probably still gets higher listing, even though this one just came out. Right? So it's not like this is appealing to a wide range of folks, but to those who go and find it, it's very tame, it's very neutral, and there are some funny moments in it. I do need to describe the plot to this episode for you to understand it, though. So the first scene, like I said, is a botched robbery at a pharmacy where there's a guy in a Reagan mask who is channeling the Point Break character played by Patrick Swayze, right? And he gets killed by another robber who is also robbing that store just coincidentally, and he's in the Robert De Niro mask that he was wearing in Heat. So from now on in the episode, these guys are known for their characters, sort of, because De Niro is still known as De Niro, even though his character was not named De Niro in Heat. So that's kind of confusing. But Reagan dies, and De Niro gets away, right? And so they're trying to figure out where he is. That's when we meet Lou, and she's kind of like Elsbeth. Do you remember her character?
Yeah.
She's got a little less idiosyncrasies.
She's also way younger.
Less charm to her character. However, she is very nice and she's able to interrogate people without pissing them off and just saying, I'm going to call your mom, and that's enough to get them to confess and stuff like that. She's the most experienced detective on the force. I said that already. She goes to her dad. She asks for a bad cop, so to speak, to help her out with a lot of this stuff. He goes ahead and hires the brother, and the brother comes in and he, like I said, is like the Sheldon character mixed with Alan Tudyk in Resident Alien. Sometimes it doesn't even seem like he's human because of like just his mannerisms, his humor, his ambivalence to everybody else. And so Louise grudgingly accepts that her brother has to stay there at her place. He doesn't even sleep on beds. He likes to sleep on those Japanese just on the floor. Basically.
That's very Resident Alien.
Yeah, no, he has definitely a few moments where I'm like, is this guy a human? And then they end up working together. she sends him off on like desk duty or like grunt work for a while, and then he cuts a break, and not the Reagan guy, the De Niro dude shows up dead as well. And that's
Wait, so
when
the De Niro guy's dead?
both of
So
them are dead.
both the bank robbers that we saw at the
Yeah,
beginning are
he
dead.
shows up in the water. They find his body in the water, and they see these stab wounds on his neck. And that's when Henry goes all Sheldon again, and he starts like measuring everything about the body, and he's able to determine exactly how far the shiv or whatever killed him went into his neck by just sticking his fingers right in there. Probably the funniest scene with him in it. It probably doesn't also have anything to do with autopsies. Like, I doubt the autoptician or whatever like sticks his fingers into a dead guy's neck just to calculate the inches.
Did they give you any suspects as to who it could be?
Yeah, I mean, the first robber had a getaway wheel guy who we never see in the first scene. And so for a while, it's hinted that maybe he killed the other dude just out of revenge, but that ends up to be a false lead. They determine, and this happens after the dad has called them off the case. He's like, because like I said earlier, the town doesn't want to have a huge crime rate, so he fudges the numbers.
Right.
And he also just pushes off cases into other towns so that their numbers go up instead of his. So he assigns them off a case. He's like, this is for the sheriff, it's not for the chief. And
So Hank.
Yeah.
Hank, it just seems like is evil. Like I thought
he's
that
a little evil.
I thought that when Clancy Brown said he was making a 180-degree turn, he was just going to
He
be
still
like
loves
the
his
good
kids, and he
cop.
still wants to see the crimes get solved. He just doesn't want them in his area, right? He just wants his record to look glowing and pristine. That's, again, why he got rid of his son at one point. And so the kids, though, aren't settled with that idea of just letting the case go. They bring one of the other cops in, and they use him as a test dummy as they do fake stabs with a screwdriver into like a bunch of meat that he's holding on his neck. And they figure out that it wasn't all individual stab wounds. It was one stab wound altogether. And that leads them to the conclusion that the person who killed him was actually the pharmacist/store owner who had hired De Niro to stage the initial robbery, stealing the drugs so that he could then give those same drugs to people who had lost their insurance. So
Wait,
there was an admirable cause to it. He didn't plan on there being a secondary robbery or for his first person that he hired to actually bring a real weapon, kill the first robber. So when De Niro's character came over, I'm going to explain it again if you have any questions,
Yeah.
but De Niro shows up at the pharmacy to ask for money or blackmail the dude. He uses his giant deer head. I think it just falls on top of the guy, or he uses it, the pharmacist uses it as a murder weapon to stab the guy in the throat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they just test the antlers, and they see that it's a match, and he goes away forever, and that's how they basically end the episode.
Wait, that seems like the most convoluted way. So you're saying that the pharmacist
Yes.
hired De Niro, the guy who walks in the store at the very beginning of the
And
episode,
this is a town of like 4,000 people, so there's not a lot of people here. Everybody knows each other.
but didn't expect to actually be robbed by the Point Break character, Reagan.
Right, because that was just coincidence. That was the humor of the first scene.
Right, but and then didn't expect to actually save the pharmacist's life with a real gun.
No, he didn't save the pharmacist's life. He just kind of saved his own life. At that point, De Niro fended for himself. He got shot at. He took this Reagan guy out, and then the mystery went from there.
That seems really ridiculous. I know that Meester said the show was a cross between Gilmore Girls and Twin Peaks, and I'm trying to see where the
They actually
Twin
mentioned
Peaks
Twin Peaks
connection.
in the episode.
Where does the Twin Peaks connection come into play, if you had to guess?
I don't know, but I'll tell you where it was in the episode was when they were at family dinner, just like Blue Bloods, and Clancy Brown's wife, who speaks a different language. I think is it Russian? It might be Russian. And she brings up a lot of shows. She brings up Twin Peaks. She also brings up Family Ties or something like that. And just they like references. There's no real reason why I would think that this is Twin Peaks, because other than it just being a small town, Twin Peaks went off the radar. Like, I don't see Leighton Meester's character getting caught up in something that wonky right now. It seems like the opposite, in fact. It seems like she's taken the point in her career where she's so successful, she's got the money, she's just laying back on her laurels and letting herself play the most simple character she possibly can.
Well, you've mentioned that it's 3 people, but I have other people listed here, like Lily Lim. You meet her this episode?
Is that a name of a cop?
Yeah.
It may be. Yeah. Bradley was also there. There's like Saskatchewan or something. There's all these like side characters, but that's not who the main people are.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what are your comparisons then for the show?
Oh, I have a couple I've already mentioned, right? Hudson and Rex, I'll throw in there as well. But yeah, the characters themselves are the reference to Elsbeth. I'll give my ultimate rating here because the crime procedurals can annoy me sometimes. I like Monk and Psych, but High Potential is one where like the main character is just too cocky, too much of a genius. That doesn't happen here, thankfully. And so it's not that. It's also not too mushy. There's not a lot of like religious overtones. Sometimes when you get the small town community, you will get a lot of church scenes. You will get a lot of like plots that deal with saving the church or something. And there's no meandering romantic plot. They just have like the romantic interests, of course. So it's playing it safe despite the title. And that said, the plot is, I would say, too common. The setting is too common to be anything special. It's not a show that's going to annoy people, but overall, I'm not going to really look back on it and think, oh, I missed that once I didn't check out the rest of the episodes. I will give it a 6 out of 10 to be generous to the leads, but I think if you don't know who they are, it's just a 5 out of 10
So
show.
basically, Leighton Meester, if you know who she is and you're a fan
Clancy
of her
Brown.
work, you
Or
can
the
watch it.
TikTok guy, right? Like if you're into TikTok, then for sure.
I know that John Quaintance, he worked on an array of comedies, including Will and Grace and Workaholics. He had this idea all the way back in 2009, and it was picked up by USA Network during the Blue Sky era, because you were talking about Psych and Monk. Psych, White Collar, Monk, Burn Notice, Suits, Covert Affairs. It was supposed to be aired along with them back in the day, but then it ended up getting pushed away.
All those other shows are kind of more interesting. Like each of them has kind of a gist to it. Like there's with White Collar, it's basically Catch Me If You Can. With Suits, it was about the lawyer who snuck into the bar, right, and passed. And and that's also Catch Me If You Can. But with this, it's like, what's the big draw? The fact that you have one friendly cop, one aggressive cop. I feel like you have every cop show like that.
Yeah, but like, could you imagine this coming out with that like thing? Because the Blue Skies era was actually a thing with USA, where it's like those type of shows just were continually coming out.
Yeah,
Does it
Burn
fit with
Notice.
that?
I could see it. I just don't think it would have lasted that long. Covert Affairs, for sure. Yeah,
I know,
it's just
I know.
a classic crime procedural element to it.
John Quaintance also decided to cast lesser-known local actors for key supporting roles to make the other characters more fresh. But like you said, it seems like the first episode was just focused on the main ones.
It also says at the end of the episode that that it was shot in a place in Australia that was like had an Aboriginal amount of people like that they were trying to represent them.
Queensland, Australia.
No, it was like Torres. Like Queensland is bigger. Queensland is the whole thing. I'm talking about this specific part that's called Torres or something. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the overall show has gotten good reviews. It has a 7.4 on IMDb, 83%. People really seem.
Have there really been that many people tuning in to check it out though?
Not that many, but I mean, like, if people, it seems like most publications are praising Leighton Meester's performance.
She is shockingly like not looking like herself from the past, and that's a good thing as far as like if you want to show yourself to be a good actress. Well, yeah, I mean, again, she's playing the opposite, the polar opposite to that character. You could not have scripted her more different because like the whole point of her version in the East elites of New York was that she was pretentious and full of herself and just like obsessed with all the greed of that element. And this is about just someone who's really down to earth and loves to shoot birds.
Hollywood Reporter called it charmingly breezy and said the show was sturdy and balanced that keeps it from tipping too far in the direction of twee comedy or sappy drama.
That's what I said it was neutral. No, it's not going to piss anybody off.
But like it seemed that because at the beginning of this you called it a drama. Is it more comedy or is it more drama?
It's more procedural. It's just whatever fits the tone of that scene. It could be really dramatic if it's a family thing and they're thinking about their mom or why they broke up all three of them, at one point. But other than that, it's usually just joke here, joke there.
I know IndieWire titled their review "Good Cop, Bad Cop" is better than it should be, grading it B-, saying "Good Cop, Bad Cop" may be a terrible title, but it's far from a terrible show.
It's a bad title. Like it does not fit this. Even the brother-sister element, like you can tell that they really are pushing to dislike each other, but it doesn't come across that way. Like, because apparently they were through the academy together, really close, and the only division is that he decided to write this article about the dad. She 100% agrees with the article, but says that he should have eaten that shit just to like move along with his career. So it doesn't factor in. And when you think of a show called Good Cop, Bad Cop, you're thinking like cheesy, maybe like The Rock in one character and Kevin Hart in the other or something, like Good Cop, Bad Cop. I don't know.
It's also the title to so many things. There's a Blue Bloods episode called it, an NCIS episode called it.
Because it's an expression.
there's a 2018 movie, 2023 and 2024 TV series.
Have you ever heard of the Mutt and Jeff technique?
I have not, no.
That's the actual thing where it came from. Apparently, there was like a cartoonist back in the early 1900s who first coined it because of this. Again, those were the names of the characters who were like, one was nice and one was bad. And it just
was it like a comic strip?
I just know it was a cartoon. I don't know if it was like a televised cartoon, but that'd be a little early for TV, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So I would probably be comic, yeah.
All right, well, that's about all I have.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next show, which stars De Niro. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.